there's some new information that I feel totally compelled to bring to your attention. I've been in Bible prophecy for 30 years, but this year is different. All across the religious landscape, we have different Bible prophecy teachers teaching this is going to happen, that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, so forth. But I have never felt, all the way from, Hal Lindsey, the last great planet Earth, way back when, I was in college, all the way from there until now, I have never, in Bible prophecy, felt a sincere spirit of urgency. I have never felt a compelling pressure of timeliness. Therefore, I come to you with the most sincere presentation that I can, that I am confident beyond a doubt that Jesus, when he told us with a reason and for a purpose, so that we, as the generation of the end days, could truly prepare. But there was always in me, and I notice in other people too, there was always a sense of, well, that may not happen in my lifetime. That may not happen in the present or in the moment. That may be future. That might be 50 years from now. That always existed, and I had that too. And it always bothered me that how do you teach Bible prophecy and then see people change? How do you present it in such a way that you see people change their lives, make some adjustments, and move to a better position? I'm sorry to tell you that the only way I know you can motivate people to prepare for the last days is fear. Fear. I believe if people get scared enough, they'll change their behaviors, get motivated, and they'll do things differently. But you can only get afraid if you understand what has been said, what is, and therefore what is coming. But the timetable I want to present to you is this. Jesus, in Matthew 24, gave us a series of a lot of signs to look for. And in this DVD, we'll deal with just about every one of those. But when you got to the end of the whole thing, the problem became in Matthew 25, after 24. He gives us the parable of the 10 virgins. He says 5 were foolish and 5 were wise. And when we examine the telling of it by our Lord, we notice something. Preparedness was the sin of the foolish. And to be prepared was the complement or the strength of the wise. So when we look at all of that and all those events, if we get to a place where we can chart those events and see that they're all on the table, then we have to examine our behavior and see if we are really ready for what's coming on the earth. Now, Jesus said a number of amazing things, but the one that I've always watched out for was, he says, and when you see these things coming, know that it's at the door. And if the question were asked, give me at least one prophecy that really tells me that it's soon, it's this one. In Matthew 24, I think it was verse 14, I'm not sure, he said, and when this gospel that I'm preaching covers the world, covers the globe, covers the world, when this gospel I'm preaching covers it. Now, I've heard Bible prophecy teachers say he was only speaking of the world of his time. And then others say, no, he's projecting that so that even thousands of years later, he's still talking about the world as we know it, the globe. In either case, we would have then, 1,500 years ago, arrived at covering the known world of the time of the Romans during Jesus' lifetime. That has already been covered. And then the second, because of the web, television, radio, and all of that jazz, it's covered now. Our shortwave signal goes into Mongolia, goes into Central Africa, goes into the most remote places. And there is a missionary that has it airplane, and he throws radios that are only Christian radios out in the mountains of Mexico. What a powerful ministry. And he just pushes them out, and they float down, and the people turn them on, and they can only get one station, and that is a Christian station that is inside those radios that he's pushed out. So, my brothers and my sisters, we could say that prophecy has been fulfilled, because due to the airwaves and radio and TV, I was in India, in central India, in a hut that was made out of cow dung. And they had no food to offer me, but they brought me into a room where they were going to boil some water so I could have a drink. And in this room, there's no refrigerator, no stove, none of the modern appliances that we know, not even a microwave. But on top of a shelf in the corner was a little bitty television that big with antennas, wires and antennas coming out of it. And Sister Joyce Myers was on television in this remote Indian village out in the middle of nowhere. Now, people say our church is out in the middle of nowhere, but we have a road, we have telephone wires, we have the internet and everything. I was in central India, where the gospel has hardly been preached, and they had a little TV, and the gospel was being preached right on that little TV. So I am sure with great confidence that the gospel of Christ has covered the globe, which means then that we are now definitely in the last of the last days, because the prophecy of Jesus came true. What a powerful prophecy when you think of it. Here he is. He comes as a carpenter's son, from a little place in northern Judea that wasn't a megalopolis. He didn't have an army. He didn't have reporters. He didn't have any of the things that powerful people had during his day. And yet he had the boldness to say, what I'm talking about is going to cover the globe. That's a powerful prophecy, because most of what you're talking about and most of the nonsense on TV, at the end of today, it'll be done. It'll never be heard again. But a carpenter 2,000 years ago said, I'm telling you stuff, and what I'm saying is so important that it will cover the globe. That is a powerful prophecy. Now, I could have said that same thing and preached that same thing 10 years ago, but I couldn't have preached it 50 years ago. I couldn't have said it 100 years ago. This is a now prophecy for us now. Now, in addition to that, I want to bring to your attention what rocked my world last week. I got up in the morning, I had my morning coffee, and I usually try and start the day peaceful and quiet. But something was urging me to turn on the television. And I did. And I turned to CNN, I turned to Fox and whatever. And the news story that was going out literally blew my prophetic mind. It rocked me back in the chair. I stood up and I had my wife, I'm screaming for her to come watch this because it was so important. Revelations chapter 6, verse 6, Jesus is speaking. And he's talking about the end days and how we would know and the different events that would kick in the end days. And here's basically what he said. He said, you'll know that we're in that last days, kicking it off, because a time period would come of runaway inflation. A man will work a whole day and his wages will be just bread. A loaf of bread. In other words, you work all day, but the price of bread will be so high. And of course I did the equivalent because I know you want it. $36 was a denarii, a day's work during Jesus' day. You would work all day and get $36. That was the value of a denarius. In other words, the loaf of bread that when I was a kid was only 24 cents, that loaf of bread is moved now to where it's a couple of dollars, but it's going to move on to where the inflation and depression will be so intense that it will be $36 for a loaf of bread. Now, many of you think, that couldn't happen. But during the depression of the early 30s, that did happen. Easily to find pictures of people with Deutschmarks filling a wheelbarrow just to buy a dozen eggs or something like that. And a dozen eggs just hit a mark I never thought it would hit, $4 this week. So anyway, as I'm having my morning coffee, the TV is on, I saw something that after 30 years of prophecy, even though I believed Jesus and I believed the prophecies, this hit me very powerful. And it was the president of Greece declaring on to whoever would watch, the president of Greece was declaring that the International Monetary Fund, the Fed, and all the people that have loaned Greece money, the euro, the Deutschmark, Germany, France, everyone that had loaned them money, he was declaring that he wants the Greek people to vote on whether to pay off their debt or not pay off their debt. Now, to you, that may be only a news story, and you may not understand the significance of it, but to a Bible prophecy teacher, it's mind-blowing, because Jesus said the world would have political leaders that would come, that would be working under the table, doing what? Binding the whole world together, creating that new world order. And so the next thing after that new world order is bound together under the table, and no one will see it coming. The first expression of it out in the open is going to be runaway inflation. Don't know if you got it yet, but here's what that means, folks. That means that the European Union, which is the economic powerhouse of the modern day world right now, it is one of the currencies that's still holding up. I had a dollar here. Who took it? It fell on the floor. Well, that's what's happened. The dollar is declining and falling. It's falling and falling. This is a US dollar. The dollar is weak now and is only worth 22 cents. This dollar is only worth 22 cents. So we're going into a period where the dollar itself is losing value and losing power and importance. The euro is right along fighting to hold on. So Greece, that owes billions, $137 billion, I think was a figure, but you can check that. They're saying we are not going to pay that, we're not going to pay that debt. This is a big, mega game changer. And while I'm running around trying to show my wife and calling anybody that I could that we are now in the book of the Revelation of Christ, we are past the time period of the Antichrist as a peacekeeper pulling the world together, and we are now kicking into the period that will be followed by series of war and war and more war. And our president this week is meeting with Putin, trying to do what? Hold the lid on a war. Trying to hold the lid on so that the Ukrainian war does not multiply and blow into World War III. So I'm watching this, and Greece, the center of architectural, intellectual Western mind world, the Western world, Greece is falling apart. In the next news clip after the commercial, they show people in Greece up and down the streets trying to get their money out of the ATM machines. And then they reported that Monday, which was, 3 days ago now, on Monday, the banks were going to be closed, And people would only be allowed to get $67 a day, period. That's all they'll get, $67 a day. We are in that first step of Revelation 6. And I don't know about you, but it hit me like a ton of bricks, because the story that followed it was the governor of Puerto Rico declaring that Puerto Rico, which is under the authority of the American government, Puerto Rico cannot pay its bills and will not be paying its debtors. So, whether you want to accept it or not, here's what happens. When a man can't feed his family and things are tough, he's a dangerous man. He is a dangerous man. And we're seeing people in Greece, they have their money in the banks, but can't get in the banks. I want to tell you something that happened during the Civil War. During the Civil War, and this is in the history books, in New York City, there was a run on the banks. Abraham Lincoln called out the National Guard and the military, put thousands of soldiers in the streets at the banks, and mowed down 1,000 New Yorkers. Abe Lincoln, to stop the run on the banks, shot 1,000 people, had them shot and killed in New York to stop the people running on the banks to get their money. And most people watching me right now, you really think that your bank, your local bank, has your money. So you may say your checking account says you have $10,000, and you think your $10,000 and my $10,000 are all in that bank. That is not the case. Most banks are lucky if they do have $10,000 in them. So many of you, if you've never been in debt, you wouldn't know what happens. But I saw it in Gary, Indiana. I saw people that didn't have food, that were starving, that were hungry. I saw the complete system politically grind to a halt. And what we're watching on television is the beginning of Revelations chapter 6, a time period of global recession. It's one twist of one button away, global recession, where a man could work all day just to get enough money to buy a loaf of bread. We're beginning to see an interesting time. So what are we saying? We're saying that America right now, they're paying their bills only because we are still believing and relying on our government. Greece, we're going to see on TV, you're going to get to watch it. When the people lose confidence in the government, we'll see what happens. Already, and in the video that we're going to show you in the DVD, we will show you that our American government has already planned what do you do when the people lose confidence in you and begin to rise up to take you out and take you down. It's going to be an interesting time. So I'm watching this show, and I see Greece and the euro are going down. And then I see that Puerto Rico is going down. And I thought, when I was broke, what was life like in my house? When I was broke and couldn't pay the bills, there was loss. Anybody here, you couldn't pay the bills? The first thing that is lost is anything you want that you can't pay for. Anything you want and you can't pay for it, it's gone. So one of the first things you want is electricity. Electricity is gone. You can't pay for it. Anybody ever been there? How about your telephone? They cut off your telephone. You want to call somebody, you can't. I can remember one time you could receive incoming calls, but you couldn't make an outgoing call. So I couldn't even call anybody and say I need, $38 so I could pay the phone bill, because they cut that off. And then what else happens? Then after that, if you want a steak, you don't have the money for it, you can't pay it, you can't have it. And then it goes on and on. So you want to do something for your kids, but you have no money, you can't. You then begin making, stay with me now, you begin making selective choices. You're broke, so you look in your pocket. You need to go to the grocery store, you get to get food, or you need to go to class, or you need to get to work. You have to make a selective choice. You have to decide, if I put gas in the car, there's no money to do anything else, have I made the right choice? Now, here becomes the problem, and this answers our first question here. What do we have to do? What does Greece have to do, and what will they go through? A shift in the economy can bring about jobs and things going. Our president and them have told us that unemployment is between 5 and 8%. But the reality is unemployment is over 24%. It's more like 28%. So we have a problem in that we have to make selective choices. Now in America, no politician has been able to get elected by telling the truth. Any politician that says, I'm going to tell you the truth, we're going to make some cutbacks and readjust our selective in order to pay the bills we have to pay to keep the heat and the lights on, that means you're going to have to do without this trip to McDonald's. That means you're going to have to do without electricity today so we can have some tomorrow. No politician in America has had a chance of that. The president of Greece got elected because he made them a promise that he wouldn't go to an austerity budget. He wouldn't go make those hard selective choices. So they voted him in. Now he's immediately faced with the problem of, if we're going to keep the country in business, and if we're going to take care of the people that we need to take care of, we have to make selective choices. He got elected on the basis of, I will not require you to make any selective choices. But the people who control the money said, you will dance to our music or we will force you to make selective choices. So a lot of the DVD that you're going to watch brings you to the place of understanding what Jesus was saying in the book of the Revelation. And here's a principle that I hope doesn't get lost. When people don't do right and need to be punished, we have an image in our heads that is so wrong. We think God, let's say if I was God, God parts the clouds, takes a look at us, and then throws something at us. I'll fix you. And that's what we think. That's what we think. So that God goes, you've been bad, you've disobeyed me, you deserve to be punished. God takes his hand on hand, you sends lightning or something, and Susan, would you come pick up the glasses? Let's sit down, keep the glasses. But what God does is, God looks around to see, oh, that country didn't obey me, that country is out of order. God doesn't part the clouds and punish that country. God says, let me find, oh, Susan is an enemy of that country. So what God does is, Susan, why don't you hit them with those glasses? No, that was a nice drop. Take them in. Take them again and throw it down on them. Punish them. There you go. Thank you, Judy. Good. Come on, give her a hand. So what we have is a gross misunderstanding of how God works. So in the last 10 years, the church has preached a benevolent God with so much grace and mercy that he never punishes or judges. That's going to really work against us here, because we have basically said we should be endowed with all of our blessings. We should never suffer, we should never be punished, and nothing should ever be taken from us. But we're at a place where we have so disobeyed God, we have so rejected his plan and rejected his program, that now we're going to begin to see some things happen in the earth, and we're going to want to go, God did that. But the reality is God is going to send our enemies to exact a cost of us. Can I give you a Bible on that? Yeah. When Israel needed real big punishment, He allowed the Assyrians to rise up and attack him. And then they still didn't get straightened out. God rose up Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians to go get him and attack him. Then they still didn't do right. He allowed the Romans to rise up and attack him and put them in bondage and so forth. So what I need you to understand, my friends, my viewers, my body of Christ people, what is about to happen is that the punishments that are going to come on the earth for rejecting God and choosing to follow the New World Order, we're going to see the external allowance of God. We're going to see Greece and the EU just crumble and economic problems over there. And we're going to see it in America. There's some states that, and the state that I'm standing in, New York State, has led the way to sin and degradation. So if God judges us, the county that I'm standing in right now was the first county to have gays get married. This is the first county in America, right here. So if God begins to judge Ulster County and the New York State, our governor and the rest of them, with the same-sex marriage, the destruction of the family and all, if all of that begins to reach a point where God says, enough, I have to judge you, he will allow an enemy to rise up and bring devastation. So it's indirect. We're going to see Greece and the euro fall, and people are going to be reluctant to say, you know, that's part of God's judgment on us. They're going to be reluctant to say, God is bringing judgment on the states that violated his law and certain things happened. And then finally, the body of Christ is going to have to realize we have to take all God. We can't just be settled with one part of God. We have to accept the whole God. And the whole God, yes, is love. Yes, he's mercy. Yes, he's kindness. Yes, he's grace. But he's also judgment, and he's also punishment, and he's also equity. He's going to do it fair and equal, but he has to do it. He cannot judge Israel and then decide, well, I've judged Israel, but I'll never judge America. We haven't been so special that God should never judge us or bring us under his rule. Anyway, I hope these few minutes have helped you, because what happened to me, I watched it on the news, and this excitement rose up on me that I now am more confident than at any other time in my 30 years of Bible prophecy. I am confident to say, and I hope you're ready, and some of you are a lot younger than me, so you may not be confident to say this, but I just had my 70th birthday, and I am confident to say that the generation that Jesus said in 1948, this generation, the 1948 generation, and I was born in 45, he said this generation will not pass away till all these things are accomplished. So, I'm very confident that I'm going to live to see all of it unfolding right before my very eyes. So we need to get ready to decide, can you believe your lying eyes, or can you believe the truth? The Greece economic problems, the global problems, the International Monetary Fund and the international courts are all connected now. All international companies are connected now. Monsanto covers the globe. GE is everywhere. They're all hooked up. So what are we going to see now? I believe still within my lifetime, we're now going to experience, can you say acceleration? Acceleration. We're now going to see the acceleration because the gospel has been preached globally all around the world, and the beginning of Revelation 6 is going to bring us into a time period. The Antichrist that has been working all of this underneath will be exposed soon, and we will be able to say, there he is. We won't be able to do anything about it. So the question becomes, if we're facing the acceleration now, if now we're going to see economic hard times hit America, and we're going to see a division of all of these things, and we're also going to see a division in the church. Now, this one I hate to prophesy, but the church is going to be divided between the Bible-believing church and then the church of entitlement. Some people think because you got Jesus, you don't have to suffer, you don't have to go through anything. But I don't know how you're going to get there when, what did Jesus do? He came here to suffer and go through all of it. All the disciples did. What makes you think then you're going to serve the Lord and get to the highest position in heaven and you don't have to go through anything? I think that's naivete. Anyway, it changed me to see those two reality actions, to see runs on the banks of Greece and to see Puerto Rico declare they can't pay their debts. This blessing of opportune time, this is it, showtime, opportune time, rocked my world. It changed me. I'm a different preacher from now. I'm a different pastor. I'm different. I now will sit in my office and look at people and say, your problem is meaningless. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore if you're alive today that you haven't dealt with your father wound or you're still mad at your mother about something she did 40 years ago. It don't matter. It doesn't matter that if you have, and America's had so much racial problems, it doesn't matter how crazy you are with racial problems right now or voting on whether the rebel flag should fly in South Carolina. All of that's meaningless if you can't put food on the table, if you can't keep the lights on. It's all meaningless, but everything is going to be brought in the right order. But when we get to opening the vials in chapters 7 and 8 and watching all of this unfold, the reality is going to be we have to readjust our standards of what's important and get to the main thing.